My father-in-law, Tom's, had always been imposing. His firm posture and piercing gaze made anyone around him feel his presence. He never showed weakness, always standing tall, his deep and measured voice exuding a natural authority. At 45, his physique was living proof of his discipline. His body sculpted like that of a 30-year-old man, broad shoulders, strong arms, always dressed in clothes that highlighted his robust masculinity. The woody scent of his cologne mixed with the faint aroma of sweat after his intense gym or combat training sessions, a ritual he never failed to follow. I am Philip, 25 years old, and I married his daughter a year ago. Since then, I have always made a point of being around, showing my presence, proving that I was part of the family. It was important to me that Tom's and I got along, that there was a connection between us beyond the bond imposed by marriage. Not that we had any conflicts. He was never rude to me, but there was something subtle, almost imperceptible, an invisible barrier that sometimes made me question whether he truly accepted me completely. His gaze, though polite, carried a certain reserve, an air of constant analysis, as if he observed me from a distance without ever letting me get too close. One night, I was in the living room, lounging on the couch, watching TV next to my wife. The atmosphere was calm, the warm light from the lamp creating a cozy ambiance, and the television filled the space with voices and the soundtrack of some random show. Everything was as usual until, suddenly, my father-in-law's bedroom door opened. He emerged with a small backpack slung over his shoulder, wearing a dark tank top that emphasized his well-defined muscles. The strong scent of freshly applied deodorant mixed with his signature woody cologne. With a firm and direct voice, he looked at me and said, "Philip, I'm heading to the gym for a combat class. Want to come along?" That question caught me off guard. It was my chance to get closer to him, to build a stronger bond, but at the same time, my mind raced. Combat? Damn, I'm going to get beaten up. The thought of facing an intense workout alongside Tom's made my stomach turn for a moment. As I weighed the pros and cons in my head, my wife, without hesitation, turned to me with an encouraging smile and said, "Go, love. Go with Dad." In that situation, refusing was not an option. I swallowed hard, forced a half smile, and nodded. "Okay, let's go." Thoms gave a slight approving nod, and without changing his serious expression, added, "Great. Put on some comfortable shorts and let's go." I got up from the couch, feeling a mix of nervousness and anticipation. The night, which had seemed ordinary, had just taken an unexpected turn. The drive to the gym was quiet, almost silent. The car engine filled the space between us, and the few words exchanged were direct and to the point. Thoms, with his firm grip on the steering wheel, maintained his serious posture, his eyes focused on the road, while I looked out the window, trying to shake off the growing anxiety inside me. Upon arriving, the characteristic smell of sweat and worn-out mats filled the air. The dry thud of punches against heavy bags, the muffled sound of bare feet on the floor, and the deep voices of other fighters created an intense atmosphere. Thoms wasted no time and immediately started giving me basic combat tips, his firm and confident voice displaying his expertise. He corrected my posture, adjusted the position of my arms, and showed me how to defend myself better. His proximity was inevitable, his touches firm, direct, without hesitation. When we stepped onto the mat, the dynamic changed. The movements required more contact, more closeness, and the way he held me began to stir something strange within me. At one point, he positioned himself behind me, his large, strong hands gripping my waist firmly. As Thoms held me, his firm hands wrapped around my waist, I felt his strength in a way that was impossible to ignore. He was guiding me, correcting my stance. But there was something more than that proximity, something I couldn't quite define. His deep voice echoed near my ear, commanding, "Relax." I tried to loosen up, but it was difficult with him so close. The warmth of his body seemed to blend with mine, and the scent of his sweat, mixed with his woody cologne, created a combination that made me a bit dizzy. Then, in an involuntary movement, I felt something pressing against me, something that made me realize that he was also reacting to that closeness. The sensation was brief but intense. I didn't know exactly how to react. There was an immediate discomfort, a kind of shock at realizing that the situation was affecting him in that way. But at the same time, a strange curiosity arose within me, something I didn't want to admit. But that was there, insistent. Thoms, however, seemed to notice my reaction. He quickly pulled away, releasing me with a brusque movement, as if he had realized he had gone too far. His face, previously serious and focused, now looked slightly tense, as if he was trying to mask what had just happened. "Well," he said, his voice a bit rougher than usual, "I think that's enough for today." I said nothing, just nodded, still trying to process what had happened. My heart was beating faster, and I felt torn between the relief of him letting go and the strange sensation that something had changed between us. He stepped away, heading towards his backpack to grab a towel and wipe his face. I stood there for a moment, watching him, trying to understand what it all meant. But Thoms gave no indication that he wanted to talk about what had happened. He simply continued preparing for his shower as if nothing had happened. After taking a few hits from him and sweating profusely during the training, my body was already heavy, my muscles sore, and my breathing still a bit ragged. Thoms, on the other hand, seemed tireless, as if the workout had been nothing more than a warm-up for him. He wiped his face with a small towel from his backpack, his arm muscles contracting with the movement, then looked at me with his usual serious expression. "Let's take a shower," he said, his voice firm and direct as always. "I'm hungry." The statement caught me off guard. I hadn't brought anything for the shower, no towel, no extra clothes. The thought of entering the locker room with him, of us undressing and showering together, made my stomach churn again. But in that situation, refusing seemed impossible. He was already moving toward the locker room, and I, with few options, simply followed him. The locker room was spacious, with wooden benches scattered throughout and metal lockers lined up against the walls. The scent of soap and hot water mixed with the persistent aroma of sweat, and the sound of running showers echoed through the space. Thoms went straight to one of the lockers, opened it with a key from his pocket, and began preparing for his shower naturally, as if he were completely at ease. I, on the other hand, felt completely out of my element. I stood still for a moment, hesitant, watching as he took off his sweaty tank top, revealing his muscular torso, marked by prominent veins and a light layer of sweat that still glistened under the fluorescent lights. He didn't seem to notice my hesitation, or if he did, he didn't care. Then he untied the laces of his training shoes and removed them, placing them carefully beside his backpack. "Aren't you going to take a shower?" he asked, looking at me while getting ready. The question was direct, straightforward, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Ah, yes, it's just that I didn't bring a towel," I replied, trying to disguise the embarrassment in my voice. He shrugged, as if that wasn't a problem. "Take one of mine," he said, gesturing towards his backpack with a nod. "There's a clean one in there." I thanked him with a nod and approached the backpack, opening it carefully. Inside there was a neatly folded towel, still clean and carrying a light scent of fabric softener. I picked it up and, for a moment, felt the soft fabric between my fingers, trying to focus on that small detail rather than what was about to happen. Thoms was already ready for the shower, holding a towel and heading towards the showers, walking with the confidence of someone completely at ease in their own body. I, on the other hand, still felt hesitant, but I knew there was no way to avoid it. I took a deep breath and started preparing, trying to move naturally, even though my heart pounded faster with every piece of clothing I removed. When I finally entered the shower area, the hot steam had already filled the space, fogging up the mirrors and creating a mist that seemed to soften the edges of the situation. Thoms was already under one of the showers, water cascading down his muscular body, highlighting every curve and definition. He washed his hair with his eyes closed, completely immersed in the moment. I chose a shower a little farther away, but still close enough to feel his presence. The hot water poured over me, relaxing my tense muscles and washing away the sweat and exhaustion from the workout. Even so, my mind couldn't completely shut off. The image of him there, so close, so comfortable in his own skin, was something I couldn't ignore. The sound of water hitting the floor filled the silence between us, but I knew that night had changed something. The proximity, the touch, the glance, All of it had created a tension I didn't know how to handle. And as I dried myself with the borrowed towel, I felt that this experience had opened a door to something that might never be closed again. As Tom's began to dry himself, running the towel over his face and arms, my gaze was involuntarily drawn to him. That was when, in a natural movement, he turned slightly, and I noticed what he had been keeping under his clothes. The sight was brief but enough to leave me completely speechless. It was impressive. The size was something I had never seen before, and the image was burned into my mind before I could look away. My stomach churned, and a wave of discomfort mixed with fear overtook me. It was something I hadn't expected, something that made me feel small and vulnerable in a way I couldn't explain. Thoms, however, seemed completely at ease, as if he hadn't noticed or didn't care that I had seen. He continued drying off, his arm muscles flexing with each movement, and then he tossed the towel over his shoulder, turning to me. "Ready?" he asked, his voice calm and steady as always. I swallowed hard, trying to disguise the tremor in my hands and the confusion in my head. "Yes," I replied, my voice coming out lower than I would have liked. He nodded and began to get dressed, grabbing a clean shirt from his backpack and pulling it over his still slightly damp torso. I quickly turned away, trying to focus on drying myself and getting dressed too. But the image was still fresh in my mind, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. The fear I felt at that moment was real, but there was also a strange curiosity, something I didn't want to admit but that insisted on surfacing. I wondered how someone could be like that, and what it meant for him, or for anyone who was close to him. Thoms, however, gave no sign that he had noticed my reaction. He finished dressing, grabbed his backpack, and looked at me. "Let's go," he said, motioning toward the door with a nod. I followed him in silence, still trying to process what had happened. The night, already filled with tension and unexpected discoveries, now seemed even more complicated. And as we walked toward the car, I knew that image, and the fear it had caused, would stay with me for a long time. We arrived home, and I was still somewhat out of it, as if my mind was floating somewhere between physical exhaustion and mental confusion. The workout had been intense, much more than I was used to, and my body felt twice as heavy as usual. Every step I took was an effort, and the muscles in my legs and arms throbbed with a dull pain that only grew as the minutes passed. Thoms, as always, seemed immune to exhaustion. He walked into the house with the same firm posture as ever, dropping his backpack on the floor and heading straight for the kitchen. The smell of food was already in the air, and my wife appeared in the living room, smiling when she saw us. "How was the workout?" she asked, looking at me with a mix of curiosity and concern. "It was intense," I replied, trying to return the smile, but feeling it didn't reach my eyes. "I'm not used to so much physical exercise." She laughed, a light and familiar sound that made me feel a bit more at ease. "You'll get used to it," she said, running her hand over my arm before heading back to the kitchen. "Let's have dinner soon. You must be starving." Dinner was a simple but comforting meal. We ate mostly in silence, with only a few scattered comments about the day. Tom seemed distant, as if he were thinking about something, but he didn't mention the workout or what had happened at the gym. I, on the other hand, could barely focus on the food. My mind was still stuck on that image, on the discomfort and fear I had felt in the locker room. After dinner, I could barely keep my eyes open. The physical exhaustion had finally caught up to me, and every movement felt like an almost superhuman effort. I excused myself and went straight to the bedroom, leaving my wife and Thoms in the living room. In the bedroom, the bed felt like an oasis. I let myself fall onto the mattress, not even bothering to change clothes. The weight of the day, the workout, the tension, the confusion, everything seemed to pile on top of me, and I could barely think straight. My eyes closed almost immediately, and sleep came quickly, like a dark veil pulling me under before I could process anything. That night, there were no dreams, just a deep and restorative emptiness. My body needed rest, and my mind, even full of questions and uncertainties, seemed to have decided that those issues could wait until the next day. Days passed, and I always avoided being home when he was going to fight, just to avoid that situation. One particular day, my wife left early with my mother-in-law. The sun had barely warmed the morning, and they carried light bags, excited to spend the weekend visiting relatives. The sound of the car tires rolling away echoed in the quiet house, and then I found myself alone with him. From the moment I knew this would happen, an unease grew inside me. This won't be good, I thought, feeling a strange weight in my chest. I walked around the house trying to keep busy, avoiding crossing paths with him in the same spaces, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. The house, which once seemed spacious, suddenly felt smaller, as if the hallways were narrower and the rooms more suffocating. He decided to have a barbecue, and soon the smell of grilling meat spread through the backyard, mixing with the warm afternoon breeze. The sound of fire crackling and fat sizzling on the coals filled the air as we drank beer to pass the time. The first cold sip was refreshing, and between beers, the conversation became more relaxed, lighter. When the meat was finally ready, we sat down to eat. The smoky flavor paired perfectly with the freshness of the beer, and for a moment, the discomfort seemed to take a break. After eating, he looked at me and suggested, "Let's take a dip in the pool." For a moment, I hesitated. The thought of refusing crossed my mind, but something told me that might seem strange. I didn't want to raise any suspicions or create any unnecessary tension. So without showing much, I simply agreed, "Sure, let's go." The day's heat made the idea even more inviting, but I knew it wasn't just the weather making my skin warm. When he appeared wearing only swim trunks, my body reacted before I could even control it. A shiver ran through my skin, not from the cold. After all, the sun was still shining brightly, but from something deeper, more instinctive. I tried to look away to stay natural, but my mind was already imagining things it shouldn't. We entered the pool, the cool water contrasting with the heat of our bodies, providing momentary relief. But then he started making some suggestive jokes, with that playful tone that seemed innocent, but carried something more between the lines. "What's up? Why so shy?" He laughed, splashing some water at me. "Or are you embarrassed about something?" I pretended it was nothing, gave an awkward smile, but the truth was my mind was already far from the casualness of that moment. I wanted to stay in control, to disguise my feelings, but every comment he made only made it harder to ignore what I was feeling. And no matter how much I tried to deny it, a part of me liked it. The atmosphere was already charged with something I was trying to ignore, but when he insisted, and without hesitation, put it out there, my body froze. My heart raced, and no matter how much I tried to control my expression, I knew something in me was betraying me. "Are you nervous because of this?" he asked, his tone provocative, as if he was enjoying the situation, and put it out there. I swallowed hard, feeling heat rise to my face. My hands were restless in the water, and I tried to keep my composure. "Of course not." I answered quickly, maybe too quickly. "Why would I be?" He gave a sleek smile, as if he already knew the answer. The silence that followed seemed to say more than any words. The gentle sound of the water moving between us was the only thing filling the moment until he spoke again. "After that day at the fight, I felt you were different." My mind immediately returned to that memory. The touch, the contact, the way he looked at me on that occasion. Until then, I thought it had been all in my head. But now with him there, staring at me like that, I realized I wasn't the only one who had felt it. "You held me like that. I got nervous. I let slip, trying to justify something I didn't even fully understand." He looked at me with a teasing smile, his eyes filled with a mischief that made me shiver. "Like this?" he said, suddenly moving closer, not giving me time to react. I felt his warm body press against mine, the pool water making the touch even more intense. His firm embrace held me, and before I could process it, his lips were on mine. The shock of the moment was strong, but desire was faster than any hesitation. I kissed him back. The taste of beer mixed with the heat of his mouth left me dizzy. The kiss was wet, intense, full of urgency. His hands started exploring my body, sliding slowly, as if mapping every inch of me. My body no longer obeyed reason, only reacting to the touch, the heat, the moment that seemed to consume me entirely. The pool surrounding us, the soft sound of the water moving with our bodies, the tension that had finally exploded. It all created a scene I never imagined living, but there I was, surrendering, not knowing where it would lead, and, in that instant, not caring. We left the pool in silence, but our eyes said everything. Water dripped from our bodies as we walked to the lounge chair, the heat of the afternoon mixing with the fire burning inside. I sat first, still breathless, trying to process everything that was happening, but he didn't give me much time to think. He approached, still wet, drops of water sliding slowly down his skin. He sat beside me and without hesitation kissed me again. The kiss was deep, intense, and soon we were once again surrendering to each other. His hands explored my body more firmly now, as if each touch was a confirmation of the desire surrounding us. My heart pounded. I knew what was about to happen, and part of me still fought the idea. I had never experienced this before, and at first I thought it would be impossible. The nervousness froze my body, my mind screamed that I couldn't, but he seemed to know exactly how to guide me. With patience, between kisses, between soft touches and whispered words, he made me relax. Slowly, everything fell into place, and that initial fear gave way to something new, intense, unexpectedly pleasurable. I surrendered. At that moment, nothing else mattered, not the doubts, not the internal conflicts. Only the desire, the discovery, and the way our bodies fit together, as if this had always been meant to happen. Time seemed to slow down, and everything around us faded until it was just the two of us. His breathing changed, becoming heavier, more uneven. The rhythm of his movements revealed he was reaching his peak, and somehow that took me along with him. The heat of our bodies, mixed with sweat and the remnants of the pool water, made every touch more intense. I felt when he finally let go completely, and moments later I followed, my body trembling with a pleasure I had never experienced before. For a few seconds, the only sound was our heavy breathing, our chests rising and falling rapidly as we tried to catch our breath. The world seemed distant, as if nothing else existed beyond that moment. I didn't know exactly what to think. I didn't know what it meant or what would come next. But at that moment, none of that mattered. I just lay there, feeling the sun's warmth dry my skin while my body still vibrated with everything that had just happened. The weekend was intense, far beyond what I expected. After that first moment, we couldn't stop. The desire consumed us, and we did it several times, exploring every moment together. The world seemed distant. It was just us, surrendering to what had once been only silent tension. And that was my first experience with another man. An experience I never imagined having, but one that marked me in an intense way. I hope you enjoyed the story. And if you want to hear everything uncut, exactly as it happened, the link is in the comments. There you'll hear details that will get you just as excited as he was on that mat. With love, Philip.